That's reflected in the pink rectangle, the southwest corner of the Temple Mount. That red rectangle is an area called where Wilson's Arch is. The other rectangle is a area called Wilson's Arch. I say the first one's Robinson's Arch, the next one's Wilson's Arch. Third rectangle is the south approach to the Temple Mount. That's where we're going to focus in on those three things right now. Now, on the left is the first rectangle I showed, the Robinson's Arch. Now, that's the same general area as the temple model on the right, and it shows an approach to the Temple Mount from the west. Steps going up and arches beneath, and one large arch as it comes to the walls of the Temple Mount itself. That arch is right by the star in both pictures. On the left you can't see it so very well, so let's bring it up. This is a close-up picture of what's called Robinson's Arch. This is what's remaining of that whole stepped way and arch access to the Mount. Robinson's Arch protruding out from the wall. These are all Herodian stones, and what's really the remnant of of Herod's temple. Our next picture pops back a little ways. On the right there you can see Robinson's Arch in the red circle, and in the red rectangle beyond that is the Wailing Wall. Now turn your eyes on the arch in the circle. It's going to turn into an artist's rendering of what it could have looked like in the 1st century, coming out from the wall. Very large walkway. And the red rectangle would be the approximate location of the Wailing Wall from this perspective. Putting the two pictures next to each other, let's see where the arch is. There's Robinson's Arch. See what's left of it in the wall there. And there's the Wailing Wall in the current picture on the left, and then in the artist's rendering on the right. We're backed up to this current picture as well. Notice the landscape below of the archaeological site, the dig down there. This was 1983. Yeah, 1980. Pretty good view of the arch there. Now we're looking back from the other direction. In the distance there is the Mount of Olives. In the Kidron Valley, the red star shows Robinson's Arch looking back to the south now, and the same archaeological dig looking the other direction down below. This is a later time, dug down further. Now we're coming back to the southwest corner in the top left picture to show the Herodian stones. The white stones you see in that black rectangle are essentially what's left of the temple on the south end of the temple approach too. You see Robinson's Arch on the left, and the minaret up above that. If you go down to the model picture on the bottom right, you see the approximate location of what's represented by the Herodian stones up above. It's just the very lower part of the south end of the temple. You see the steps and the gates. We're going to take a closer look. But there is the arrow shows Robinson's Arch. Now, this is the top of the wall of the Temple Mount in the 1st century. If we were to put that in current, it looks something like this, a little higher than that minaret. And from Robinson's Arch up, essentially, it's completely destroyed and missing. The temple is. Well, the Temple Mount. Now we've come down to a street level view. In both of those pictures, it's showing the street level, which is Roman stones, and the picture on the left is about 20 years later, and showing about another 20 to 30 feet of digging by archaeologists. And the picture on the bottom right is just looking back the same direction at the Roman level, showing a variety of layers of time, really. But that last blue line shows the Roman stones in the artist rendering of Robinson's Arch. Now this diagram even gives another clearer picture of the same thing. You see the top of the Temple Mount in this diagram compared with Robinson's Arch geological dig on the bottom right. Well, you also see the yellow line. That represents what is remaining of Herod's temple. It's seen in white down below. Above that yellow line is subsequent construction. Now, in 1980 is when I was there to take the picture on the right, and the excavation level was right there on both pictures. That's how far they had dug down. The orange in the top left is representing what's remaining of Robinson's Arch. And if you look at the orange down below the arches, we're going to look at that in a minute in a later excavation level. To do that, we have to dig down deeper. There's the arch, the close-up picture of Robinson's Arch today. Now, I got these off the internet, and this is a later excavation level. They've dug down another 20 feet or so to the Roman street level down from the arch. And that's the same street level, the picture we saw before, showing the street stones that would have gone under the arch. The green is 1980 excavation level. Now, 10 years later, they've dug down another, I don't know how far that is, 20, 30 feet. Look at the people, how far it is, the difference between the two, and they finally got to Roman Road. And there are earlier eras below this elevation, pre-Herodian. But if you look at the supports at the top left picture, those are represented by the yellow in the diagram itself. Now you can put arches on top of that, and you'll see how that turns into an access staircase. But it's all been destroyed. That's all that's left of it. Before 1990 or thereabouts, it was all underground, just been uncovered by archaeologists. This is an interesting little spot. This is a place called watch both pictures We're going to move to the north from Robinson's Arch over to a place called Wilson's Arch. Now this was another long road approach to the center of the Temple Mount, and you can see its arches beneath in the right picture. In the left picture, in the red rectangle, you see there's just a conglomeration of structures there, houses and buildings and such. That's because the arch that you see on the right is completely underground. It has been there and underground since 70 AD when Titus destroyed the temple. The Romans at the time took all of this wall material that was above the Wailing Wall up to the top and completely destroyed it. They shoved the material, the rocks and the stones, down into the Tyropoeon Valley, creating quite a mess, and the land fell. Well, the western wall has been cleared out, but the structures above Robinson's Arch, you can't clear them out. They're living structures. They haven't torn them out, but they have done archaeological digs beneath these structures. What you need to do is go down to the Wailing Wall, go to the left side, which is the men's side, and go in a series of tunnels, access tunnels, and you can come upon Robinson's Arch underground. Unfortunately, at least when I was there, women weren't allowed to go there because you had to go on the men's side. The women's side is on the right of the Wailing Wall. See? Oh, there it is. It's pointing out exactly where Wilson's Arch would be in both pictures. As you can see, it's kept its structure so much better than Robinson's Arch because it's been underground and preserved. Huge Herodian stones. I'll come back now to that structure I mentioned that was arbitrarily put there. They just know it was in Jerusalem. It's called the Hippodrome. Hippodrome. Maybe you've heard that word before, or maybe you've seen this studio rendering of it from a fairly famous movie. The Hippodrome is where the race in Ben-Hur, the chariot race, took place in the movie. Of course, Ben-Hur was a fantasy book. It was a fiction, a tale about the Christ. But they took advantage of the Hippodrome and one of the most famous scenes of all time. Now, there is Robinson's Arch, and right in front of it would have been the Hippodrome, located here, and so I just gave what it would have looked like. Just would be standing in the Hippodrome in this picture right here, and the chariots would be driving over us in the bottom left-hand corner. And that's looking back at Robinson's Arch the other direction, the opposite of what the picture on the right is, and you would be looking out at the Hippodrome there and the Valley of Kidron, and we're in the Tyropoeon Valley right now, looking back. That's what the Hippodrome was, right in the center of that model. Hippodrome Valley, the Tyropoeon Valley. And just to get back to give you an idea where that is in location, the Hippodrome would have been right there in the Tyropoeon Valley at the southwest corner of the Temple Mount. Now let's take a closer look at the south approach to the Temple Mount. These are called the Hulda Gates. Now you go up those steps and through those gates, and you would take a series of steps up tunnels that would arrive at the top of the Temple Mount. This is where you'd come from the Temple of the Abydonian Kings, or up David's city, the Ophel, to get there. This is looking back, and you can see David's city in the foreground, the Pool of Siloam down below. If you were to go from the Pool of Siloam to the Temple Mount, as Jesus did at one point, he very likely would have either gone up Robinson's Arch, Wilson's Arch, but probably up the Hulda Gates if he was given access. That's a close-up of Hulda Gates, south entrance. Now this is the modern excavation site of the gates, Herodian stones. There are the approximate location of the Hulda Gates and sealed off gates in the current walls. These, if I recall, are not rather, these gates were open until the Crusader period and then sealed off, and have been ever since. Close-up shot of the Hulda Gates, sealed since the Crusader period. The black marks are powder burns from Israeli wars with the Arabs. We're going to take a closer look at these steps now, a little better picture, broader shot, and later excavations. On the left is 1980, and on the right it's quite a bit later. They've dug the steps out really nicely. Even a closer shot in the later excavations that are clearer. That's again backing up. We're seeing the Hulda Gates and the steps approaching. Now let's focus in on Solomon's porticos at the top. Once you went up the Hulda Gates and up the steps, you'd come up close to these porticos at the top. Just a back look from the perspective of the Pool of Siloam. You'd see the temple from down here in the 1st century easily. Now I've got some computer generated perspectives of this is the approach up once you've gone up to the Temple Mount, looking back on Solomon's porticos, and that is looking at the Solomon's porticos from on top of the Temple Mount. And this is inside Solomon's porticos, looking at the Temple Mount. I mean Herod's temple, the temple itself. And this is in Solomon's porticos, looking at one end, and then looking down at the other. Solomon's porticos were essentially decorative, as I understand it. They didn't serve much other purpose except the vastness of their beauty in architecture. Now we'll put all these pictures next to the Holy Land Hotel model showing the approaches coming up to the Temple Mount at the south end. Enlarged. Here's a diagram to help us get us oriented again in just a slightly different way. This is Temple Mount with Robinson's Arch, and then there's the Western Wall. There's Wilson's Arch. There's the Hulda Gates, the south approaches, and then Solomon's porticos. Also, of course, Herod called them Herod's Basilica because he built it. But the Jews, I think, like to call it Solomon's porticos. That's why I've called it that. This is a map of the Temple Mount carved out on a wooden door, with the Mount of Olives on to the right, Jaffa Gate to the far left. Now what about the time period of this Herod's temple? Of course, Jesus is crucified right in the middle. But Herod's temple was built 20 years or more before Jesus was even born. And we'll look more at that later on when we come back to the Temple Mount itself and Herod's temple. But it wasn't finished until 64 AD.